March 21st, 1980. Philadelphia's streets erupted over the assassination of mob kingpin Angelo Bruno, a killing so notorious. They still call it the night the mob went quiet. But just 3 blocks away, in a dim alley still wet with that night's rain, another body lay cold, a 25-year-old diner waitress named Julie Revsin. Her murder took 12 minutes of police attention. Bruno's took 12 years of FBI manhunts. Why did one life eclipse the other? Why did hers vanish? March 21st, 1980, a date Philadelphia can't forget, and a date it desperately wants to. By nightfall, the city's streets would be splashed with headlines about the brutal assassination of mob boss Angelo Bruno. But in the shadow of that infamous murder, another life was taken, a life that didn't make the news, a life that didn't get a task force, a press conference, or even a proper investigation. A 25-year-old woman named Julie Revsin left her shift at a diner that evening, walked 3 blocks toward her apartment, and vanished into the noise of history. This isn't just a story about 2 deaths. It's about how one of them was erased, how a city's obsession with power, corruption, and spectacle left a young woman's murder to rot in the dark. No answers, no outrage, just silence. But let's start at the beginning, because Julie Revsin deserves more than a footnote. Picture Philadelphia that night, a city already choking on its own secrets. The Bruno crime family had ruled the streets for decades, gambling, extortion, bodies buried in concrete. But at 8:03 p.m., Angelo Bruno sat in his Lincoln Continental, engine idling outside his favorite restaurant. A single shotgun blast to the head. The gentle dawn was gone, and the city erupted. Police swarmed. Reporters sprinted for payphones. The mob's empire began to crumble. But just 3 blocks east, a different story was unfolding, one that wouldn't make the morning paper. Julie Revsin, a nursing student with a laugh her friends called contagious, clocked out of her diner job at 8:15 p.m. She waved goodbye to the fry cook, tied her scarf against the cold, and then nothing. By 9:30 p.m., Bruno's body was front-page news. By 9:45 p.m., Julie's was just another case file in an overstuffed drawer. No flashing lights at her crime scene. No FBI agents dusting for prints. Just a rookie cop, a half-empty notebook, and a question nobody bothered to ask. Who was Julie Revsin, and why did her murder matter so little? To understand why Julie's case faded, you need to understand the machine she was up against. A machine built on money, fear, and the stories we choose to tell. Angelo Bruno's death? That was a legend. Julie's? A nuisance. But let's be clear, this isn't about conspiracies. It's about priorities. And in 1980 Philadelphia, a mob boss's legacy outshone a waitress's life every time. Philadelphia, 1980, a city split in 2 above ground, crackling neon diners, rusted trolley cars, and working-class neighborhoods clinging to the American dream. Below ground, a labyrinth of mob-run tunnels, wiretapped payphones, and bodies buried in foundations. And at the center of it all, Angelo Bruno, the gentle dawn, whose smile hid a ledger of debts, favors, and blood. But this story isn't about him. Not yet, because on March 21st, as Bruno's empire teetered on collapse, a 25-year-old nursing student named Julie Revsin was living a life so ordinary. It was almost invisible. And that's the tragedy. Let's rewind. For years, Bruno's rule was unchallenged. His men controlled the docks, the unions, even the cops. But power? It's a grenade with the pin half pulled. By 1980, rival factions were circling. Betrayal hung in the air like smoke. And Bruno? He knew. He'd started eating at the same restaurant every night, a man begging for a bullet he saw coming. Meanwhile, 3 miles north, Julie Revsin was living a different kind of routine. Clock in at 6 a.m., serve coffee to truckers, study anatomy textbooks on her breaks, save every tip for nursing school. Her biggest worry? Passing finals. Her darkest secret? A crush on the mechanic next door. She had no idea her name would become a footnote to a much darker story. But Philadelphia? It knew. The city was a pressure cooker. Cops took bribes in broad daylight. Journalists wrote obituaries before hits. And at 7:30 p.m. that night, Bruno's driver took an unplanned detour. Julie's fry cook mentioned the weird guys in suits lurking by the dumpster. The city held its breath. 2 lives. One ticking clock. Only one would explode into legend. Think about it. Bruno's world was all champagne toasts and silk suits. Julie's was $3.75 an hour shifts and hand-me-down scrubs. He dined on steak at Palumbo's. She ate leftover pie in the diner's flickering break room. He had an army of lawyers. She had a studio apartment with a lock that stuck. But here's what they shared: Philadelphia, a city that chewed up ordinary lives to feed its myths. And on March 21st, it would devour them both, one with fireworks, the other with a whimper. At 8:15 p.m., Julie tied her apron behind the counter, waved to the night cook, and stepped into the cold. She took her usual route home, past the laundromat, the boarded-up theater, the alley where streetlights always flickered. She didn't run, didn't hurry. Why would she? No one famous dies here. She might have thought, but history isn't kind to the innocent. By sunrise, Bruno's face would be on every TV in America. Julie's? A Polaroid in a detective's basement. A nameless girl in a city that loved its monsters more than its angels. 2 murders 1 hour apart, one would ignite a war. The other? A shrug. Let's break down exactly how Philadelphia's priorities played out in real time, minute by minute, life by life. 8:03 p.m. Angelo Bruno's Lincoln Continental idles outside Palumbo's restaurant. He's laughing at a joke his bodyguard told when a 12-gauge shotgun blasts through the driver's window. One shot, execution style. The gentle dawn slumps forward. Blood sprays the dashboard. And just like that, Philadelphia's underworld explodes. 8:15 p.m., 3 blocks away. Julie Revsin clocks out of her shift at the Liberty Bell Diner. She swaps her apron for a thrift store peacoat, grabs her paycheck, and waves to the night cook. "See you tomorrow, Eddie," she calls out. He'll later tell police it was the last time he heard her laugh. 8:45 p.m., Bruno's body is discovered. Within minutes, 14 patrol cars converge. Detectives in tailored suits bark orders. News vans jam the streets. The mayor is woken up. The FBI is alerted. The city treats this murder like a declaration of war, because it is. 9:30 p.m. A janitor taking out trash stumbles into an alley reeking of copper and rain. Julie's body lies half hidden under a tarp, her nursing textbooks strewn in a puddle. A single patrol car arrives. One officer scribbles notes by flashlight. No tape, no photographers, just the hum of distant sirens, all racing toward Bruno's spectacle. 2 murders, 1 night. Only one would dominate the news and the resources. But here's what they didn't say. Bruno's killer left a shell casing. Julie's left a scarf. Bruno's case got a task force. Julie's got a post-it note. And by dawn, Philadelphia had already chosen which story to tell. Listen closer. At 8:03 p.m., you hear the shotguns roar. At 8:15 p.m., the jingle of a diner bell. At 8:45 p.m., police radios crackling with "Officer down," codes reserved for VIP victims. At 9:30 p.m., a janitor's shaky voice on a 911 call. I think she's dead." But the loudest sound of all, what didn't happen next? No door-to-door searches for Julie. No FBI profilers. Just a detective flipping through her file years later, muttering, "Hell of a coincidence." Ha, coincidence? No, this was a choice. A city choosing whose blood mattered. By midnight, Bruno's murder was national news. By dawn, Julie's was a 2-line obituary. Same city, same night, same justice system. But only one of these deaths was deemed unforgivable. The other, just forgotten. Angelo Bruno's murder sparked a firestorm. Julie Revsin's? Barely a flicker. Within hours, the city split into 2 realities, one drenched in spotlights, the other buried in shadows. This is the story of what happens when justice isn't blind, it's biased. Let's start with Bruno. By dawn, over 50 FBI agents swarmed Philadelphia. They tore apart his mansion, flipped his lieutenants, and subpoenaed everyone from mayoral aides to garbage collectors. The press camped outside police headquarters. Tip lines jammed. Reward money hit 6 figures. This wasn't just a murder, it was a national crisis. Meanwhile, Julie's body lay in a morgue drawer labeled Jane Doe No. 3 for 12 hours. No one called her family. No one dusted the alley for fingerprints. Just a single overworked detective, Frank Varelli, assigned to her case. He'd already had 18 homicides that year. His notepad was full. But here's the kicker, Varelli tried. He asked for a forensics team. Denied. Requested door-to-door interviews. Denied. Even the coroner's report called Julie's death suspicious, pending further review. But further review never came. Why? Let's break it down. Reason 1. Apathy in a city of noise. Philadelphia was drowning in chaos. Bruno's assassination lit a fuse, mob wars, political scandals, headlines screaming mafia mayhem. Daily, cops were reassigned to guard mob informants. Federal resources bled dry. And Julie? She was just another victim. No mob ties, no drama, no story, Detective Varelli later admitted. We had bodies piling up faster than we could count. A waitress with no enemies? Low priority. Low priority. Let that sink in. A human life, reduced to a checkbox. Reason 2, the mob's long shadow, then there's the fear. Bruno's men still controlled the streets. Cops took bribes. Judges got threats. And Julie's murder? It happened 3 blocks from Bruno's hit. Too close. Too coincidental. Rumors swirled. Did she see something? Hear something? Was she a loose end? Varelli quietly asked the FBI if Julie's case overlapped with theirs. They laughed. You think we've got time for diner girls? So the file stayed closed. No follow-up. No cross-referencing witnesses. Just a quiet agreement. Don't poke the bear. Reason 3. The erasure of ordinary lives. But the ugliest truth? Julie didn't fit the story Philadelphia wanted to tell. Bruno was a kingpin, an antihero, a character. Reporters fought for scoops about his empire, his mistress, his last meal. Julie? She was normal. A girl who loved disco music and tomato soup, who sewed her own curtains, who dreamed of working in a pediatric ward. No villains, no vendettas, just a life snuffed out for no reason. And no reason doesn't sell papers. It doesn't win elections. It just happens. Her sister, Linda, put it bluntly. They treated her like she was disposable, like her death was an inconvenience. Here's what we know was lost. The tarp covering Julie's body? Tossed in a dumpster. Unprocessed. Her scarf? Found 10 feet away? Mislabeled and destroyed in 1983. Security footage from a nearby store? Accidentally taped over. Meanwhile, Bruno's car became a relic. Every fiber, every bullet fragment preserved. His case file? 12,000 pages. Julie's? 43. Even the alley where she died got paved over a year later. No plaque, no vigil, just asphalt. Detective Varelli retired in 1995. He kept a copy of Julie's file in his basement. In a rare interview, he confessed, I'd wake up some nights, thinking about her, wondering if I'd pushed harder. Maybe. He never finished the sentence. But here's the thing, it wasn't his fault. He was one man against a machine that didn't care. A machine that chewed up nobodies and spat out cold cases. Because when we ignore murders like Julie's, we send a message. Some lives are worth less. Less effort, less time, less grief. Bruno's killers were eventually found. Julie's? They're probably dead now. Or old. Or free. But it's not about solving it anymore. It's about admitting the truth. Philadelphia failed her. Not because they couldn't find answers. Because they didn't try. Julie Revsin. She wasn't a mob war. She wasn't a conspiracy. She was a woman who laughed too loud, loved too hard, and died too soon. And if her story makes you angry? Good. Anger means you still believe in justice, even if Philadelphia didn't. Case number 804521. That's how Philadelphia labeled Julie Revsin's murder. But to those who knew her, she wasn't a number. She was the woman who hummed Fleetwood Mac off-key, who burned every pot of coffee she ever made, who dreamed of holding newborns in a maternity ward. This is the story they didn't erase, the one that survives in the hearts left behind. Let's start with her best friend, Carla. Julie was loud. She laughs. Not obnoxious. Just alive. She'd dance between tables at the diner. Even if customers glared. She didn't care. Her coworker, Eddie, remembers her obsession with crossword puzzles. She'd do them in Sharpa. No mistakes allowed. If she messed up, she'd start over. That's how she tackled life too. Then there's her sister, Linda. She wanted to be a nurse because our mom died young. Julie said no kid should feel that scared in a hospital again. She'd practice IVs on oranges in her apartment. Julie Revsin, 25 years old, terrible cook, aspiring healer, human being. She saved $17.50 a week for nursing school. Kept the cash in a mint tin under her bed. Her textbooks were secondhand, filled with notes like, lungs equals balloon? Ask Dr. Martin. Her landlord, Mr. Rossi, recalls her bargaining for rent extensions. She'd pay me in diner pies, apple crumble. Mostly. I let her slide. How could you say no to that smile? But here's what the police files didn't record. Her favorite song, Landslide. The way she'd tap her foot when nervous. The scar on her knee from a bike accident at 12. Instead, they wrote, victim found in alley. No suspects. Case pending. Pending. For 45 years. After the funeral, Julie's life was packed into boxes. Her sister kept her nursing textbooks. Her friends split her vinyl collection. The diner hired a new waitress 2 days later. But the police? They lost her case file, twice. First in 1985, when records flooded a storage basement. Again in 1992, when a clerk misplaced it during a move. Even the alley where she died got a new name, Bruno's Pass. Tourists snap photos where his car was parked. They don't know 3 steps away. Julie took her last breath. Carla. She'd hate being called a cold case. She was warm. So warm. Eddie. Sometimes I set a coffee cup where she used to stand. Old habit. Linda. The cops asked about her enemies. I said, her only enemy was the alarm clock. Detective Varelli, archival tone, I wish I'd known her. Maybe I'd have fought harder. But Julie's voice? Gone. No diaries. No voicemails. Just fragments in the people she loved. Linda keeps a Polaroid of Julie in her nursing scrubs. Fake ones she sewed herself for practice. The photo's creased. Fading. She looks so young. Linda whispers. But she was a fighter. Still is. In a way. Carla planted a magnolia tree in her backyard. Julie loved how they bloomed messy. No apologies. And every March 21st, Eddie pours a coffee at the diner's counter at 8:15 p.m. Lets it go cold. For luck, he says. But it's not luck he's after. It's memory. Because Julie's murder isn't just unsolved, it's unseen. Bruno's death spawned documentaries, books, even a true crime podcast with 12 episodes. Julie's? You're hearing her name for the first time. Philadelphia archived Bruno's shotgun. Julie's mint tin of savings? Trashed as evidence in 1981. But evidence of what? A life interrupted. A future deleted. A city that chose which ghosts to mourn. History books will tell you about the night Angelo Bruno died. They'll call it a turning point. A tragedy. A cautionary tale. But Julie Revsin? She's not in the books. She's in the crossword puzzles left unfinished. In the magnolia trees that bloom every spring. In the diner coffee that goes cold at 8:15 p.m. She's proof that we don't just lose people when they die. We lose them when we stop saying their names. So say it with me, Julie. Revsin. Say it louder than the silence that swallowed her. 45 years later. Julie Revsin's murder isn't a mystery, it's a void. A crime defined not by clues, but by silence. So let's ask the questions the police didn't. What could have happened that night? And why did no one care enough to find out? Theory 1, wrong place. Wrong time. Let's start simple. March 21st was chaos. Mob enforcers prowled the streets. Cops were distracted. Grieving Bruno's crew wanted blood. Maybe Julie was just there. A botched robbery? Her purse was missing. $12 tips and a lipstick. But the alley wasn't a robbery hotspot. No other attacks reported that night. Or was she a casualty of Bruno's war? Innocent bystanders were killed in mob crossfire. But Julie's body showed no signs of panic. No defensive wounds. Just a single, efficient strike. Detective Varelli's notes say. No witnesses. No motive. Just bad luck. But bad luck feels too easy. Too convenient. Theory 2, the witness who knew too much. Here's a darker angle. Bruno's assassination wasn't quiet. The shotgun blast echoed for blocks. What if Julie saw the killers fleeing? Or recognized someone from the diner? Mob hits often silenced bystanders. In 1978, a parking attendant near a Bruno hit vanished. His body turned up in the Delaware River. Julie's coworker Eddie recalls. That week, 2 guys in suits kept lurking by the dumpster. Never ordered food, just watched. But the FBI never interviewed Eddie. The suits, never identified. Was Julie a loose end? Maybe, but loose ends get knives. Not alley dumpsters. Mob hits are clinical. Julie's death felt rushed. Or maybe the killers didn't know who she was. Just that she was there. And in mob logic, maybe is enough. Theory 3, the secret they buried with her. Now, the personal angle. Julie's life seemed ordinary. But ordinary people have secrets. Did she owe money? Dating someone dangerous? Arguing with a customer? Her sister Linda admits. She'd gotten weird calls the week before. Heavy breathing, then hang-ups. Julie laughed it off. Probably a prank. She said, the diner's owner told police Julie had a stalker, a regular who'd leave napkins with Heartsuit J scribbled on them. But the report lists no leads, no follow-up, without evidence. It's just noise. But noise is all we have. The evidence that died with Bruno. Here's the problem. Bruno's murder sucked all the oxygen out of the room. The FBI seized diner security tapes to scan for mob faces. Not Julie's killer. Witnesses near her alley were never questioned. They'd already been interviewed about Bruno. Even the coroner rushed Julie's autopsy to handle Bruno's VIP case. So what's left? A half-empty file, a scarf lost in evidence, and a question. Did Julie's death need to be unsolved? Or was it just easier that way? The truth is, theories don't matter anymore. The trail is ice cold. Witnesses are dead. Evidence is ash. But here's the real tragedy. It didn't have to be this way. In 1982, a retired mob enforcer hinted to reporters that Julie knew a name she shouldn't. The DA's office ignored it. In 1998, a deathbed confession from a small-time crook claimed Julie was a message. But the detective on duty? He'd never heard of case #80-4521. Even the possibility of truth was squandered. Not by time, by apathy. Angelo Bruno's killers were found. Their motives picked apart in court. Their stories sealed in history. Julie's killer? They're a shadow. No face. No name. No reason. But maybe that's the point. Philadelphia didn't just fail Julie. It let her become a ghost. A flicker of what if in a city that loves its monsters too much to fear them. So we're left with theories. Not because they matter now, but because they're all she has left. The truth? It died with Julie. And Philadelphia let it. Why does a murdered mob boss still haunt our true crime podcasts, documentaries, and history books while a waitress's death vanishes into thin air? The answer isn't about justice. It's about value. And 45 years later, we're still asking the same question. Whose life is worth remembering? Let's be honest, society ranks grief. A celebrity's overdose becomes a cautionary tale. A migrant worker's death? A statistic. A billionaire's kidnapping fuels global headlines. A single mother's disappearance? A hashtag. If she's lucky. Julie Revsin's murder is a fossil of this same disease. In 1980, Philadelphia decided Angelo Bruno's death mattered. Because he was powerful. Because his killers threatened order. Because his story sold papers. But Julie? She was ordinary. And ordinary victims don't make history. They get erased by it. When we let cases like Julie's rot, we don't just fail the dead, we fail the living. Think about it. 1985, a serial killer targets sex workers in Philly. Cops call them low risk. 2002, an immigrant teen's disappearance is blamed on gang ties. Case closed. 2023, a black college student vanishes. Media says, was she involved in drugs? The names change. The excuses don't. And the system? It keeps winning. Angelo Bruno's murder birthed mob lore. Books dissect his last meal. Tour guides point to his death site. True crime fans debate his killer's motives. Julie's legacy? A sister who still writes to the DA every March. A diner demolished in 1999. A case file thinner than a takeout menu. But here's the truth. Bruno's story is a distraction. A shiny object to make us forget the real crime. Not the murder. But the indifference that followed. Let's name the machine, apathy. Cops assumed Julie's life had no value to protect. Corruption. Fear of mob retaliation silenced curiosity. Complacency. A public too addicted to Bruno's drama to demand answers. And today, the machine still runs. It just wears new faces. Algorithms decide which missing persons get Amber Alerts. News cycles prioritize clickable victims. We're still ranking lives. Still choosing who deserves justice. Angelo Bruno's murder? It's in every history book. Julie's? It's not even in the footnotes. And that's the problem. Because footnotes are where we bury stories we're too ashamed to tell. Where we hide the people we've decided don't matter. But here's the thing about footnotes. They're still part of the story. They're just harder to see. So why does Julie's story matter? Because it's not hers anymore. It's ours. It's about every person who's been told their pain isn't interesting enough. Their loss isn't profitable enough. Their life isn't memorable enough. History isn't written by the victors. It's written by the grievers. The ones who keep saying a name until the world can't pretend not to hear. Say it with me, Julie Revsin. louder than the machine, louder than the silence, louder than 1980. History remembers Angelo Bruno as a cautionary tale. But Julie Revsin? She's not a tale. She's not a lesson. She's a name that survived 45 years of indifference, a name that refuses to disappear. Let's say her name again, Julie Revsin. Not Jane Doe, not Cold Case 80, 4521. Julie. She was 25 years old, born in a cramped Philly row house, learned to ride a bike on cracked sidewalks, hated licorice, loved stray cats, failed her first driving test because she parallel parked too carefully. She was an aspiring nurse, not for the money or the prestige, but because when her mother died of cancer, Julie held her hand in the hospital and promised, "No one else will feel this alone." She was a sister. Linda still keeps her Christmas stocking hung, 45 years later. "It's silly," she says, "but I can't let go." She was a friend. Carla remembers how Julie would sneak extra fries onto broke customers' plates, how she'd laugh until she snorted, how she'd hum lullabies to calm rowdy drunks at the diner. Julie Revsin wasn't a mobster, wasn't a headline, wasn't a conspiracy. She was a person who bled, dreamed, and mattered, still matters, in ways Philadelphia refused to see. For 45 years, her case file gathered dust. Her killer walked free. Her story dissolved into the city's noise. But here's what they couldn't erase: the scar on her knee from a childhood fall, the way she'd bite her lip when concentrating, the $17.50 she saved every week, wrapped in a rubber band, tucked inside a mint tin. Ordinary things, human things, the kind of details that don't fit in police reports, but should. Philadelphia buried her story, but her family? They kept it alive. Linda wrote 213 letters to the DA's office. Eddie saved her crossword puzzles. Carla named her daughter Julianne. They didn't need headlines or task forces. They had love, and love doesn't expire, doesn't close cases, doesn't surrender. Julie Revsin, 25 years old, aspiring nurse, sister, friend. She wasn't a mobster, a headline, or a conspiracy. She was a person, and 45 years later, she's still waiting for someone to care. But while she waits, we remember.